Hi, I'm Rubadiri Victor. I'm doing the guest review here today on Sophie Says. I'm going to be looking at The Dark Knight, the second in the trilogy of Christopher Nolan's Batman films.
Where is he?
We are at this moment in the world, Black Lives Matter moment, and a moment when white supremacy is being interrogated, kind of for the first time in the world's history. So I kind of want to kind of put that kind of lens on how I'm looking at films, and in a way, it's the way that we should be looking at films, at the at representation, and the way that the black icon is represented and the black humanity is represented in films. And so I've taken what was one of the kind of masterpieces of the last 20 years in world cinema. It's kind of accepted, featuring one of the greatest performances of all time by Heath Ledger, rest in peace. Phenomenal performance. And as an actor myself, you live to see other actors kind of do that kind of work. I also appreciate Christopher Nolan's work, his dedication to kind of realistic, gravity-bound, magical realism. He doesn't try to kind of depart into kind of CGI fantasy and those kind of things. He kind of roots things in a world where there are consequences and there's gravity. That is a kind of exceptional conceit for a director, especially this time in the world where you have all these tools in your toolbox available to you. But he's committed to pursuing human revelation, catharsis, by keeping it rooted in this kind of physical reality. So that's all of this to set up who the players are in this particular film. I remember when it dropped, Dark Knight was. It was a time when there was a lot of there was world terrorism, there were terrorist attacks and those kinds of things, so that kind of represented a kind of external kind of world of the film, a kind of external part of the narrative, but it also went into the kind of psychology of terrorism in the sense of radical world change, and what is the kind of individual, and what is the type of mind that does that, and the flip side of that in terms of deep-seated criminality and anarchy. And I just remember there was a time in the movie, I think it was after, I think Joker destroyed the hospital. I just remember the feeling in the cinema, or where like people were kind of feeling it in their cells, what was going on, and that is the kind of, you were feeling like he was taking you into that place where you kind of, forcing you to kind of choose and those kinds of things. And those are the marks of a great filmmaker, storytellers, himself, his brother, and the others, script writers. All that is to say that this is this grand narrative that's telling all these epic stories of the human ideas, of great grand ideas of the contemporary human experience. But where are the black figures in on all of this? I remember I was doing a class basically talking about these same kinds of things, and these little children about 6-7 years old. And just asking them, I mean, I was thinking, like, I wonder if these are things that kids at that age kind of see or experience and that kind of stuff. So it was a primary school, I think this was a primary school in Carnage. So it was the school, the population of all the students that were assembled was like about 98% African children. And I asked them, who saw Dark Knight and stuff? It's a kind of mature film for little kids, but nearly everybody hand shot up, of course, and they were real excited and that kind of stuff. But then I asked, what happens to all the black men in Dark Knight? And they say they're dead. And they said, 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 they're dead. And 6 years old, and they already kind of know the fate, what their fate is, in narratives like that. That is what is kind of expected of their body and their spirit in narratives. There are different studies and that kind of stuff, but by the age of 16, people would have watched like 40,000 of these 40,000 things on a screen, television shows, movies, and that kinds of stuff. It's safe to say that in like 65 to 85% of that, they would be witnessing Black Death as the principal mode of representation of the black body. This is not accidental. The Black Deaths that happen in Dark Knight, each of those deaths happen to open a next door for the Joker. So each time the Joker is kind of ramping up his assault, or is going deeper into the journey into his psyche and that kind of stuff, and is unlocking another door, the sacrifice that is made to enter into that is a black body.
It's all part of the plan. Come on, hit me!
Now, if you also know like the codes of storytelling, the hero myth and those kinds of things, the 18 chapters, the 18 chambers of the hero myth and that kind of stuff, you looked at in the history of cinema, the first hero myth. So the thing is that all primetime dramas, all mainstream Hollywood narratives are hero myths, right? So there are different kinds of storytelling, but the hero myth narrative, your blockbusters and those kinds of things, your primetime stuff, constitute hero myth narratives. And it's a specific code that goes on. And in that code, there are 18 parts of it in the narrative when you're writing. What really that you experience, the reason why we are all thrilled to go and see those types of movies and watch those films, and that forms the kind of premium level of storytelling, is that there's certain biological things that it trips off, things in your synapses, and in the code of the hero myth, what happens is that the hero becomes God, right? And then he becomes man again. So he leaves us, he goes on a journey, and in that journey he becomes God, and then he returns with a gift or a message, right? So that's basically what we see, but that's what we feel. That's the moment that we see in that show with Nicolas Cage when he has to make this choice and stuff. He is on the bridge. Does he go back and betray his brother or whatever? But the police are there blocking him, and how is he going to go if he goes back? His brother dies, and if he goes forward, the police are going to catch him, and he's going to go out and that kind of stuff. And he makes a choice and that choice is a choice that makes him become God. He becomes one with the car ramps up. He does the thing that no other human being can do, right? He transcends humanity. He becomes one with the car goes up, over, the car, him, and the sun become one, and he becomes God. Those are the things that we live for in heroic narrative. Those moments and those kind of things where like all of us feel it. That's why people, when they walk out, kick ups and that kind of stuff, everybody walking around like that. Italians walking out of Rocky all feel that they could beat black people or whatever. Those are the moments that we see. That's the transcendent moments. Those are the moments when the hero becomes God. It took more than 100 years of film narrative before there was the first movie where there was a black hero myth, and that was Blade.
You better wake up. The world you live in is just a sugar-coated topping. There is another world beneath it.
So none of Denzel Washington's or Will Smith movies are hero myths, right? They do not go through the code. They might be the lead character, but they don't go through the code. So they don't ever become that thing. So I'm sure that a lot of people, when you leave their movies, you leave with a kind of, it was good, but you don't feel that, you just don't have that thing. It's because they don't put them through the code. They never become God. Right? And this is the structure behind storytelling. This is what we feel cinema. This is how storytelling works. Each different type of story has different deep structures So sitcoms have a deep structure, soap operas have a deep structure, primetime dramas, those blockbuster things have a deep structure. All these things, horror movies, all these things have deep structures. And they're not what you think they are, right? So let's say like soap operas, for instance. People say, well, what is a soap opera? A soap opera is it's bacchanal, it's thing, it's love and thing, and it's whatever, and it's all these different kinds of things. And if you were to write that, you would fail, right? You'd be like, soap operas have rabid followings, like it's women especially. It was rabid, like the people shut down the entire day to reach home in time to see these things. But what is it? Why, if you were to just think, but I think it is X, and write that, it will flop. You'd find like people don't have that participation with it. Because what a soap opera really is, a soap opera is really the story of the two kingdoms. What? It's like the medieval chessboard. King, queen, rook, knight, all those things. And there's a whole set of laws and rules. And that's actually what you respond to in a soap opera. So you think is bacchanal and it's staying, that's not what it is. It is two kingdoms. And there's a whole set of rules about how those things engage. And so each genre has a particular set of rules. And the hero myth, the rules are that the hero becomes God, and there's a whole set of other things. Needless to say, in the history of film, black people don't become gods, even in the ones when they are the supposed hero, right? Wesley, thank God for Wesley. He went outside of Hollywood, he had his own independent thing, and he was just because that he always wanted to be an action star. So that was Wesley's thing, and because instinctively he was kind of reaching for, it's like, well, I want to be able to do X, like just like how, and he just went after it, and he stumbled, he stumbled into it, and he opened that door for that type of narrative, So all of this is to rewind to the thing of Dark Knight and all these kinds of stuff, and we have all these superhero narratives. The superhero narrative now is the main narrative in global filmmaking. It is the premium form of storytelling on planet Earth. It's Marvel and Warner and DC and that kind of stuff. It's biggest earners, most butts in the seats. And that arena of storytelling is an arena of storytelling where, kind of the human pageant is kind of writ large. But the books that most of these things are derived from are things where there are very little black heroes on the ground in those things. I was a comic book pyong and that kind of stuff. I love comic books. Like comic book emancipated my mind and my storytelling and all those things. But I was always conscious that I wasn't present, and so in the transition of those books into film, we're going to be faced with those things. So, we had the Black Panther and that kind of stuff, and they've started to change some of the genders, and they've changed some of the races of some of the things, Heimdall and Thor and those kinds of things. But the thing is that you're looking at narratives where 95% of your heroes are white males, right? And women and African people, Hispanic people, Native peoples, and those kinds of things form a very, very, very small part. And the part that they normally play, they played in the comics and that kind of stuff, were kind of stereotypical and victims and villains. And in the Dark Knight, there's a range of different people. There's one black person that lives, which is the criminal on the boat, who goes against type.
You don't want to die, but you don't know how to take a life.
Big brutish thing, and he goes against type, and he's the one that says we will not kill the ones on the other boat. But all the other black men, they die, they're fodder. They are the sacrifice that opens each one of the next chambers for the Batman and for the Joker, right? And that is even more villainous, right? Because you're consciously using the black body as sacrifice yes, of course, there's the Morgan Freeman character, Lucius Fox, who is a voice of reason.
Beautiful, isn't it?
Beautiful, unethical, dangerous.
An inventor. The kind of power of Morgan in a way and those guys is that they've kind of created a space where they can insert themselves in narratives like that as a kind of he's also kind of a magical Negro kind of character as well. As like there's Morgan and there's the criminal on the boat, and they both kind of represent those kinds of voices inside there. But in the middle, the thread that threads in between is this litany of black death that cuts all the way through, and those deaths are all visceral and they're all, these are real things, and sometimes you have to ask yourself, so how much is enough? Like, am I gonna watch just so I can see one halfway decent black character towards the end? Will I watch 6 black people get killed and 6 stereotypes? 5? Where's the cutoff point for me? I'll if the movie has only 2, you know what I mean? It's like these are the kind of things that you kind of have to, you find yourself like kind of negotiating with yourself, which no white person does. You know what I mean? It's like, white male is like sitting down there, well, will I watch this? No. You know what I mean? Only now with some of the films that are coming now, they're finally getting challenged. And, it seems like if the world is ending, I remember going to see Blade I was in the States in 98 when Blade opened. And I went to see it twice. First time I went to see it was in Manhattan, the heart of Manhattan, in a kind of posh part of Manhattan. And I can say, so who was around me were like real Central Park kind of elite and that kind of stuff, and NYU students, right? So rich white people, rich Jews, and that kind of stuff there, and then clutched to the nines. And so like they started to get very uncomfortable during the movie because it's like, wait, what is happening? And then there's a part in the film where Blade starts to beat an NYPD officer, right? Now that is revolutionary. For us, that's just like, but a white NYPD officer, a black man beating a white NYPD officer is revolutionary stuff for America at that time in representation. The cinema, well, the NYU students and stuff started like laughing and kicking. The older whites and Jews were as still could be. They did not know what was going on. They were like, what the hell is happening? It was an amazing thing to experience that entire movie. And then when he ends up killing the lead villain. I think was an ex-white male character and that kind. So like these were like bomb bursts in that theater. It was like the silence and the shock that was going. And then I went and I watched it in Brooklyn with a black and Hispanic audience. And it almost was a riot, like, because people were seeing things that they had never seen before. Because if a black man was to hit a white character, that black man would die. Like he gets away with it once. Like that's how narratives up to that time in cinema ran, right? You could not do it, right? Sidney Poitier got away with a slap in the 60s, and that slap resonated for like decades.
Was Mr. Colbert ever in this greenhouse, say last night about midnight?
In mainstream Hollywood, this thing happening, Blade going around slaughtering white people up and down and that kind of stuff, and in the end, and he goes through the hero myth, he becomes a god, whatever, and in the end, and he triumphant and those kind of things, and there is no sanction on him, and he beating an NYPD officer in the mix and those kind of things. I mean, when that, especially NYPD thing happened, the cinema almost riot. People were running around this, like it was amazing. that is the power of representation and of icon and of storytelling.
They've got their claws into everything. Politics, finance, real estate. There's a war going on out there.
Now, in human storytelling, all art is derived from the ancient art of the shaman, right? The high priest. That's like the first scientist, the first priest, the first artist in old tribal societies and stuff, even before the hunter-gatherer and stuff, societies and those kind of things, would have been the shaman. So these were people who would be able to talk to God, talk to the ancestors, talk to the animals, and those kinds of things. They're the ones who probably the first fishermen too, because they're the ones who knew psychotropic substances and those kinds of things. And they were the ones who would dance, would make marks, would paint, would act, would create costume and pageant and all those different kinds of things. These are the first artists, first priests, scientists, fishermen, all of these things all in one. And the principal thing that begins rituals is sacrifice. That is what is pouring of water on the ground, sacrifice of an animal, the sacrifice of a plant. That is how the sacrifice of Jesus Christ on the cross, and then the sacrifice in Mass. That's how narratives begin, right? That's how all ancient narratives begin. It begins with the act of sacrifice, because what every narrative really is a spell, right? So all storytelling is you're calling something, right? You want something to come. You're calling something that never was in the universe into existence. And to do so, you're making a sacrifice to call it into existence. And in these films, the sacrifice is a black body. The first shot in Jurassic Park, right? So Jurassic Park marks the beginning of modern filmmaking. It is the beginning of realistic CGI filmmaking and those kinds of things. And Steven Spielberg is breaking the wall in terms of the new frontier of science, in terms of digital and virtual technology, and in terms of biomechanics, genetic manipulation, and those kinds of things. Those are the two streams that science are going down right now. So that film, in a kind of way, kind of represents those kind of two things, kind of colliding in kind of narrative form. But the first shot is an extreme close-up of a black man. And he's the black man who's going to die in the next couple of seconds from the dinosaur. So he is the first death by dinosaur, by the creation of this new technology, right? And again, it's not accidental. The narrative begins with an extreme close-up of his face. So this is you want us to enter the narrative with an image of the thing that you're going to kill, to open the door for this thing. Am I going too far? No. Because if you would just look at Hollywood narratives, you would see quite clearly the way that these things are depicted. And the thing is, let's take this even further and in a more deadly kind of way. Now, for black people looking, so right now the world is at this incredible revolutionary moment. People are in the streets. As I'm sitting here, there are literally probably hundreds of thousands of people in the streets all over the world campaigning for Black Lives Matter and against white supremacy, historic white supremacy in all its forms. Statues are toppling, policies are changing, police are being interrogated, police are being fired, arrested. All kinds of things are happening right now as I speak. And that was because of a sequence of narratives, of videos of black death by white hands, by white police hands, right? Which started with, we didn't see Trayvon, but it started with Trayvon Martin and it was almost 10 years of these narratives that you see. It actually began 20 years ago with Rodney King, right? Which was the first kind of removing of the veil of something that we in our community knew this was happening all the time, but the rest of the planet, and especially white people, comfortable white people, is like, whoa, look at that. And like, but it's like, we were telling you that this was going on like all the time. But we are people in the streets right now, and this is happening right now because of 8 minutes and 36 seconds of George Floyd's murder by this white policeman and his 3 accomplices. The thing is for black people, that is familiar. If I was to turn on the TV now, I would see that of me, fictionally. But you see, fictionally, the body doesn't register it as fiction. You're dying. You're being suffocated. You're being shot. You're being hung. You're being whatever, a lot of times by the heroic character. So we are accustomed to those things. And the thing is what is more diabolical is that the narrative that plays in the police's heads that makes them do those things. What is that narrative? They see the black body as essentially violent, aggressive, and criminal. So that is what the white, especially white policemen, but we see with all the Karens of the world in Central Park and all over the place and that kind of stuff, the white women went encountered with black people, but especially black men, going ballistic, whether it even be black children, the presumption of their guilt or the presumption that they should not be here in this space, that their existence is transgressive and subversive. And so therefore they must be removed or punished. Where does that come from? Where does that narrative that plays in every white head, but especially in the police's head, these men who are charged with protecting and serving status quo, and therefore protecting and serving it from what? What is the specter that so any time that they see the black body, they actually see this specter? A lot of those things are fed by Hollywood narratives. So there are 2 places that they would have gotten that from. One would have been from historical texts and the grand epic overview of history, which is told to us in our education system, which depicts white male adventurism as superior and superhuman, as a whole catalog of adventures in science and in exploration and all these kinds of things that have given the modern world all its benefits, right? And in that narrative, the sacrifices that were made to make that happen are native peoples, are black, brown, and red peoples, right? And their slaughters in the hundreds of millions are like small kind of indices. There are games about it. There's cowboys and Indians and those kinds of things, which glosses over the slaughter of less 300 million people, So we have that grand epic kind of the historical narrative, which we get in our formal systems. But in the informal entertainment systems, we get this other narrative. And this happens every single day, dozens of times a day, And remember, the flip side is that black, brown, red peoples, yellow peoples are seeing themselves represented in this particular way. But the flip side is that a white male is seeing literally millions of images of himself, of millions of possibilities, millions of adventures, millions of himself, always becoming God, always. That is his diet. He expects that as a matter of course. I remember the first time I'd gone, it was Trinidad and Tobago Film Festival, and I was there for the entire day. One day, I spent from 8 to 8 in the, and it just happened to be a really good day, and there was some really good films and that kind of stuff. But I just remember coming out of the cinema that particular day where there were these really excellent films, And there was something, I was like vibrating, my body was like, I was like, what the hell? I was like, and it was the first time in my life that I had seen myself, a black human being, heroic and at peace for an entire day of narrative storytelling. In my life, this is recent, this is like about 6 years ago. I had never experienced a diet of ever seeing myself. Now, this is something a white person takes for granted. By the time they're 3 years old, they would have seen like thousands of times when they, just literally as a matter of course. Me as a big hardback 40-something-year-old man now encountering for the first time in my life. And I am a film student. So I have literally I've watched more films than most humans, and had yet, this was the first time. That is the tragedy of representation. So there's this saying, this is a Native American saying, that the left wing, right wing, both parts of the same bird. So, we say that, the Republicans and the right wing and the white supremacists and the Nazis and that kind of thinking and that kind of stuff versus the liberals and, the Democrats and, the, right thinking, good thinking, white people. But the thing is, Hollywood is controlled almost completely by liberals. It's controlled by democratic-leaning, democratic voting, white people who would like to call themselves anti-racist. And, well, I'm not racist. But the narratives that have been created by that particular machine for the last 100+ years, which has represented black people as corpses and as stereotypes, and all black, red, and other peoples and stuff are created by those exact same people. So that goes to kind of show you how racism is not that simple. It's not, it's not them. It's not that person in the Ku Klux Klan and whatever. It is actually all these well-meaning, democratic voting, liberal whites who are perpetuating these narratives of black death and the black criminality and the black subversive body and that kind of stuff that is playing in the mind of the white police officer that kills the black man. So the same, that left wing is beating and creating those narratives that the right wing is now picking up, and the result is black death. It's for this reason that I can't watch Dark Knight, despite the fact that it contains one of the greatest performances that I've ever seen, and is objectively one of the great performances in filmic history by Heath, God rest his soul, who also is a beautiful liberal soul. But he was in that narrative doing those things. I can't watch 300. I will never watch 300. 300 was also the beginning of another form of modern filmmaking. Immersive CGI environment, the bringing of more kinds of hard, bloody realism, Frank Miller type of anarchy, bringing it into prestige storytelling like filmmaking and those kinds of things. 300, and again, 300 is like a high point of technique. But again, the beginning of Hollywood, the first great film of Hollywood, the film that all Hollywood takes all of its tropes from, is The Birth of a Nation. And The Birth of the Nation visualizes that there will be a time when black people take over the White House. This is what The Birth of the Nation is. And when black people take over the White House, there's drunkenness, theft, corruption, and the rape of white women rampant all over. And who comes to the rescue? The Ku Klux Klan. So the Ku Klux Klan rides in and slaughters the black people who were taking over the White House and taken over. That's the beginning of modern American Hollywood and filmmaking. It was screened at the White House, and it was sold to the American people as the definitive thing. This is the beginning of this new medium, in the same way that 300 kind of represented that. Now, 300 actually, in a way, is the new birth of a nation, because 300 emerged at the moment of the Iraq War, right? The illegal invasion of Iraq, right? Iraq. So who are the villains in 300? Persia. Persia is ancient Iraq. And the Middle Eastern characters, the Arabic, Iranian / Iraq people. And the pinnacle villain is a black god, right? And then there this tribe that is a kind of Chinese looking tribe that, so all of America's and white, the kind of white supremacist nemesis are kind of writ large in this narrative, right? So in 300 you have the black god, right? Which is the kind of virile black man who contains supernatural energies, which is the thing that terrifies the kind of white supremacists, that there's something, despite whatever we've done to black people, there's some kind of supernatural thing inside of them that they're able to withstand it, and somehow there's this kind of, and it must be destroyed. So it's a kind of acknowledgement that there is something inside of those people that is, but it must be destroyed. The Arabic people and the inscrutable Chinese, right? And the narrative is, of course, these 300 men standing in the breach, slaughtering literally tens of thousands of all these other people, right? In the most graphic and gruesome ways possible. At the moment when these invasions are actually happening on the ground. So this is kind of like the insides of George Bush's head, or Rumsfeld, or what's his name, Bolton, or the Hawks. You actually kind of, in 300, you kind of like inside the head of that thing. And the thing is, a lot of Frank Miller's narratives are racist, right? He is one of the great storytellers of the modern age, and he just happens to be racist. He likes black women or Chinese women. He like a lot of racists. They like the women. The men, though, are marked for death. So he has black female and Asian female kind of heroines or those kinds of things, but the men meet gruesome ends in a lot of their narratives. And Schneider in 300 kind of takes it there. I mean, I can't watch those things. The thing is that you are what you eat. And if you put those things in yourself, you killing cells inside of your body. You inviting disease. You are, because it is attacking you. It is meant to attack you as a black, brown, yellow, red person. You would, if a Native American person, I know watching John Wayne movies. I'm not, like, why would I be putting those things in my body? We arrived at a space where we can interrogate these things in a real way. We must interrogate these things. Because, as I said, ground zero of where we are right now has come out because of white policing of black bodies. And on the ground, white policing of black bodies is ending with black murder. And that is fueled by narratives that are fed by Hollywood and by the left wing, that is feeding these narratives that plays out. So when I would even give about 35% of those guys the merest benefit of a doubt, in the sense that when they saw that person coming towards them, I believe that they tripped, because the narrative that they have in their head of that black body is these tens of thousands of images that he's seen. You could even see it in a lot of the racist narratives, and there's a lot of, I'm sorry to say it, but they have some East Indian kind of narratives that they're talking about, or even some of the local 1% kinds of things when people talk about black people. And the way that they talk about it, like if you see like the first paragraph when they talk about black people, if they would stop thieving, robbing, being so lazy, whatever, and that kind of thing, they would do better. Like, you know what I mean? So thieving, robbing, killing. Well, that is the narrative that they have of the black person and the black, you know. Now, up until like very recently, I didn't know any people like that. I mean, the people that I know, you know, were all, you know, I mean, you know, teachers, nurses, doctors. These are the black people that I know. That's the world that I lived in, you know. Policemen, whatever. These were, you know, I mean, working class people, artisans, whatever, and those kinds of things. I don't see those people at all. They don't appear in any narratives anywhere. They're not heroic. They're never shown to be, you know, they don't exist. What exists are these other things in Excelsis jail. So the challenge at the moment is myriad. But because we're doing with movie reviews, these are the challenges I see. First of all, one, normally when I do these classes with kids and those kind of things, I challenge everybody. It's just like, well, and the parents, I say, create a hall of fame in your house, right? If you're a black, brown, red, yellow person. One wall, just heroes, right? From this moment stretching back to antiquity, so that your moment did not begin with Columbus and the meeting of the worlds and the invasions and that kind of stuff. You have thousands, tens of thousands of years of history, antiquity. So heroes starting from here, stretching right back. Thankfully, we have Google, and you have printers and color printers or black and white printers. You can print out these pictures with these little biographies underneath, and you can fill an entire wall of these images. But because we're talking about emotion, the moving picture, and that kind of stuff, I want to challenge you to find life-giving narratives of yourself. If you're a woman, black person, brown person, yellow, red. They're out there. There have been filmmakers who've been working hard, and you know, especially from other nations and other climes. There is a particular link that we had. I had it with the Black Caucus. I did a folder of films for like black families, films that you could raise your children up on. You know, like, so everything from youth to adult stuff to children's based stuff. You know, like dozens of things. But that's the challenge. Is you are what you eat. Put things in your body. On your drive, we have all the things that you have saved up and those kinds of things. Fill it up with those things. When you repeat and you binge watch and those kinds of things, watch those things. Boycott those things which demean you and which kill you, and whose intent is your death. You know, the horror movies where you die first and all those, you know, I mean, but it's not just the horror movies, it's everything, you know. That is what is being played out in the streets. And that is what must be overturned. And so that is the challenge. And, you know, and the other part of the challenge is we have to emancipate our right to tell stories in every single medium. Locally, this can only happen with 50% local content quotas. It has to be legislated. Television, stations must be forced, as well as the cable channels, must be forced to show a percentage of local filmmaking, which means that they have to incentivize it. It means that the advertisers, the corporate, everybody has to get on those things. It means that if you have prime time, 8 to 10, it has to be local content. And everybody will go cheapo because that's the nature of all our television stations. They will all have talking head programs and that kind of stuff, boring old talking head programs and stuff. The first person to risk on a sitcom will steal the entire demographic, will take everybody. And then the arms race will begin. It's like what happened with Ian Allen. So Ian Allen appears 6 to 7 p.m. was dead air. Nobody cared about that time in television and that kind of stuff. Ian Allen took that time, created a phenomena that was minting millions of dollars. That made 6 to 7 o'clock prime time. All the other television stations had to know to start to program 6 to 7 o'clock. They had to find programming and create local content programming that could compete with this thing. Imagine that happening for a Saturday children's morning, cartoon morning, and children's programming morning, evening children's programming, 8 to 10 o'clock prime time stuff, Sunday evening sports magazine programming. Imagine setting up, all local content does is set up that parameter that forces the market then to do that work. The first person that risk will steal the entire audience, and then everyone else will have to risk. So this is my soapbox. 50% local content is a must. It must happen, and we are demanding it. Artists Coalition of Trinidad and Tobago, me, Rubadiri Victor, stakeholders, film and television stakeholders. Movies, theaters. We have literally hundreds of animated and live action film shorts that have been made in the last 7 to 8 years, right? I would say we probably have over 400 to 500 shorts that have been created in that period. There is no reason why, like when those of us who are a little older, and I said before I'm 26, just a little older, we remember a time when cinema used to be shorts before the feature. So you'd go to the cinema and there would be an animated or a short film before you see the film that you're going to see. Why don't we have local film shorts as part of every single movie-going experience? So that when you go to the cinema, 5-7 minutes of your life, you're going to see a local animated film or local, and there is a catalogue, there's a filmography of these things. And in that way, you start to get accustomed to seeing yourself on screen. Then you might even start to demand it more. And it's like, I could take on seeing myself as a little superhero. I could see a little Trinidad superhero, you know what I mean? And demanding it because you're seeing the possibilities. Or because a young generation becomes accustomed to seeing itself. They see it as their right and just take it because it's just part of their DNA now. It's like, well, yeah, I really love that one, that kind of stuff. Why I can't do a feature length and go for it? But the thing is that we have to win those spaces and we have to create those spaces. So 50% local content, television, radio, and shorts and features, local features in the cinema. And then we also have to champion those who are doing the work outside and stuff. You have great things like, we are talking about Dark Knight, Into the Spider-Verse. It's an incredible movie. Again, I'm a comic book pyong, and there are a lot of comic book movies where their changing of the original text kind of rubs me the wrong way. I can't take the new Peter Parker and the new Spider-Man, those things I can't deal. That's not my Peter Parker. But that movie, yes, Miles Morales exists in the comics. But they found a way in that narrative to honor Spider-Man. In fact, it's probably the best, it's one of the, if not the greatest superhero movie I've seen. It's one of the top three. It honors its original text, and at the same time, it gives a hero for the new age, in a black body in Miles Morales. And he earns it. And he goes through the entire arc of the hero myth. That moment of Miles leaping off the leap of fate, the inverted cityscape, and him rising is one of the great moments of filmmaking. The guy this is three directors. One of them, he did Rise of the Guardians. It's a black animator. That is another movie. It's normal, it's white characters, it's white folklore characters, European folklore characters, Jack Frost and all these things. You could see his influence because that movie, when I was watching that movie, it's like, this person is somebody who's immersed in comics and comics illustration. It's the greatest, most effortless transition of the power of comic book illustration in animated form. And so when he got onto into the Spider-Verse, I kind of knew that there was going to be something special, and you could see his hand in those things and the way that they honored black lives, the three-dimensionality of the black family and the black personalities and those kinds of things. Yes, there was a black criminal character, but he had depth and stuff, but he was not the thing. He would, there was this other thing as his father and all those kinds of things. And that movie was the other end of the spectrum. It's something that I would watch again and again and again and again, in a way that I will never watch Dark Knight ever again.
Wait, so how many of us are there?
And so, that's it for me, my movie review of The Dark Knight. And it's really about a review of movie making at this moment of Black Lives Matter, using the prism of the superhero storytelling in one of its great narratives to show how dangerous representation can be used and the way that it operates in the lives of us all. And so thank you for allowing me to be here with you. Thanks, Sophie, for the opportunity. Peace out.